Hi guys, I am back with another tutorial. Today I'll talk about the class in Python. So I have already shared the basics of Python in my previous videos. If you haven't seen them, please go through them. So you'll have a very basic idea about what is Python and what is it used for and what are the very basic stuff that you can start with. So as I told you, Python is an object-oriented language. So it is definitely having the concepts of inheritance, then abstraction, then overriding, overloading. Okay, so we will see all these things in here. So that's why I am back here with the class concept. Like all other languages, it also has a class. Okay, and the syntax and the structure of class is very simple. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so class, again, it is nothing but a collection of data members and functions and variables which can be accessed using the instance of the class. So you have to create the methods and variables, and then you can create an instance of the class and then access them using the dot notation of the object. Okay, so let's go through it. Yeah, so we'll create a very basic class. Okay, a class let's say student class. Okay, student class. Let's give it any name. Okay, a basic class. Okay, dot py. Okay, so while writing the class, so you you have to remember that, so it is like a class name. You have to give the class followed by the class name. So let's say I will call it as a student. Okay, fine, and then followed by a colon. Any block is always starts with a colon in class. Any method, any block or any class, you have to end it with a colon. Okay, and then of course the indentation is very important in Python. So any set of statements which is supposed to be in a block, you have to put it, you have to indent them. So it is better, right? In other languages you have to put starting curly braces and then closer curly braces, so which is not here. Here there is the concept of indentation. Okay, fine. So then again it also has a constructor. Okay, so let's define the constructor. Constructor name will be anything. I mean, of course it will be predefined, it will be init. Okay, this is the name of the constructor. So it is always having a self. Okay, self will always be there as the first argument to any method in a class in Python. Okay, then we'll give three attributes to it: name, roll number, marks. Okay, fine. So this is how we can define a method, or this is an init method. Okay, fine. So we'll call any method in a class as a self methods, because okay, there are two types of variables in class. One is class variable and one is instance variable. Okay, so class variable is defined inside a class. Okay, but outside the method, which is global in a class. So let's define a class variable. Okay, so this will be a class variable. Right? Okay, so then we'll define some instances variable. Name equal to name. So then, as you all know, it is similar to the constructor which is there in other languages. So whenever you create an instance of a class, the first thing which is called is the constructor. Okay, and it is whatever is there in the constructor that is called. Okay, so that's it. I defined the constructor here. Okay, fine. Let's go back. Let's go and write another method other than a constructor. Okay, So let's say I want to display the employees information. Okay, fine. So any, as I told you, right, any method or anything will always have a default argument as a first argument as a self. Okay, and any method in class will be any block will be always starting with a colon, as I given here. So we'll print the information. Okay, employee name. Okay, okay, name. I'll just paste it. Okay, fine. So this will be, I want to print the roll number. Okay, and then I want to print the marks. Okay, so this is a very basic stuff. I just wanted to show you the concept of class using it. Okay, right. Okay, so here it will be roll number. Fine. So this is how we can display the data. Okay, so if I want to print the class variable, I have to access it using the, okay, let's call it serial number. Okay, okay. So if I have to access the class variable, which is counter, so I can access it using the class name itself. Okay, student dot the class name dot the class variable. You can access it using this technique. Okay, fine. So whenever right, so here I'll call counter plus, I'll increment the counter by 1 whenever we'll instantiate the class, so that counter will be increased. It means that one of the student is added. Okay, fine. So this is all. Let's go back and create the object for the class. Okay, so fine. So yeah, there is one more thing. There is a documentation of the class. You can give a description to a class. Okay, inside the codes. Okay, so you can write anything like, okay, this is basic class on student details. So it will just to give a brief of the student class. So if you want to print it, right, student class info, so it will print a documentation or whatever you have written there. So that is accessed by class name for dot class name dot underscore doc. So this is how you can access the documentation of the class. Fine. So let's try to execute it. Fine. Okay. So this is, it will just print the documentation or the information which you have given in that section. So that will be printed. Fine. Let's go ahead. So I have created the class suite. I have given a class variable, I have given a constructor, and I have given a method. Okay, this is the class class method, this is the constructor, and this is the class variable. Right, let's go back, let's go and create one. Okay, let's create an object of this class. Okay, equal to, so how do we create the object? Give a reference name equal to the class name, equal to reference name equal to the class name, and then you have to give the 3 parameters which is there in the constructor. Of course, we'll not give self is a default argument, so you don't need to give it while calling it. Okay, so we'll give 3 parameters. Okay, let's say Shankar, then roll number, anything, and then marks. Okay, fine. So this is how we can create object of the class. Fine. Let's see how far we are good or not. So here you see I'm executing the class, but nothing is happening. It is just printing the documentation of the class. Why? Because I have just created the object of the class, but I haven't you know, so the constructor is being called. So I'm passing Shankar as a name, 123 as a roll number, and 55 as a mark. So it is going to the constructor, and it is assigning the local variable, which is the instance variable, the values. So self name is having Shankar, self roll number is having 123, and self marks is having marks. Okay, fine. So now we'll call this show employee. We'll call this show employee method. Okay, so how do we call a method? Using the instance, obviously. So you will use the instance that we have created here, dot, using the dot notation, and then the method name, show employee. Right. So as I told you, right, see in here show employee is having one argument, self, but I'm not giving that argument here while calling it. Let's see what is happening. Okay, so now I'm getting some error, counter reference before assignment. So counter is it is considering counter as a local variable, okay, in the show employee method. So of course, yeah, counter is not a local variable, it is a class variable. So class variables should always be accessed using the class name, right? So now this is pointing to the class name, which is incremented by 1. Okay, now what is it? Global name is not defined, of course, yeah. So as I told you, right, this name should be given as self dot name, right? Similarly, self dot roll number, self dot marks. Okay, now I'm getting some other error. Okay, so roll number is an integer, right? So here you see roll number is an integer, marks is an integer. Okay, so instead so here to concatenate two strings we use plus, and if it is an integer and then a string, so you can simply give a comma here. Okay, that should be enough. Okay, so yeah, I think this should be it. I think, yeah, so integer, it is not allowing to concatenate using plus, only the strings can be concatenated, right? So let's try to execute it. Okay, so this is the serial number 1, then the employee name which I passed, roll number and marks, which is being printed. So here the counter was 0, so when I called the show employee, the counter is incremented, the class variable is incremented by 1, which is which looks logical. Okay, whenever we create an instance, one student is added and we are giving it a serial number. Fine, let's create another object. Create another object. So we'll give it an object name as 2. You give some other name. Okay, anything, Alok. Okay, any roll number and some marks. Okay, yeah. So we created another object here. We'll call it. Yeah, right. So the object name is 2. Second object name is 2. Right. Right. Okay. So when I created the another instance, and let's see if I execute it. So it will show me another serial number 2, another instance. So and another employee details, right, which is expected. So whenever I'm calling this instance, whenever I'm creating an object and calling it, so a student counter is incremented by 1 and it is being displayed, right? So this is there are other features, there are a lot of other stuffs in class that you should know, but this is very basic. And I'll stop here and we'll continue in the next session more on the class. Thanks.